Daniel adjusted his jacket for the 10th time as the massive golden doors opened. He had never seen anything like this palace before. The walls were alive with glowing vines, humming softly as though they could breathe. The floor shined like a mirror, and the ceiling stretched so high it seemed to touch the clouds. This was the royal court of Varela, home to the alien race known as the Varellans. He had been chosen as one of Earth's cultural exchange representatives, a great honor. But as he walked across the long hallway, all Daniel felt was a nervous pit in his stomach. His footsteps echoed with each step, making him painfully aware of how out of place he seemed. Round him, Varellans glided gracefully, their tall, slender forms moving with an elegance he could never match. Their voices carried a melodic tone when they spoke to each other, and when they looked at him, it was with a mix of curiosity and quiet judgment. A Varellan attendant, dressed in silver robes, guided him to the grand hall where the reception was taking place. Daniel could already hear the soft music of strange instruments and the light murmur of conversation. As he entered, all eyes turned toward him. He tried to stand tall, but it was impossible not to feel small among them. In the center of the hall sat the royal family. The king, wearing a crown of silver branches, looked powerful yet calm. Next to him sat the queen, with a gaze that seemed to read every thought in the room. But Daniel's eyes were drawn to the young woman standing a few steps away from them. She was dressed in deep teal robes that shimmered as she moved. Her long hair flowed like liquid metal, and her eyes sparkled with mischief. The attendant whispered, "That is Princess Alira." Daniel gave a respectful bow, but as he rose, he noticed Alira studying him with a curious smile. She said something in her language, and those nearby laughed softly. Daniel didn't understand the words, but from the way they glanced at him, he could tell she had made a remark about him. A translator stepped forward. "The princess says she finds your voice sharp. She has never heard an accent like yours." Daniel felt his ears grow warm. He wasn't sure whether to laugh or be offended. "Tell her I'll try to sound less sharp," he said awkwardly. The translator spoke his words, and Alira laughed lightly, covering her mouth in a way that was both graceful and teasing. She responded again, her tone playful. "She says," the translator added, "that perhaps humans should learn to speak properly if they wish to impress the Varellan court." Daniel swallowed his embarrassment and forced a polite smile. It wasn't the warm welcome he had imagined, but at least she was talking to him. The king raised his hand for silence, and the hall quieted instantly. He spoke in a deep, melodic voice. "We welcome our guests from Earth. May this exchange be a step toward understanding between our peoples." The translator repeated his words in English, and Daniel nodded respectfully. He had prepared for this moment, carefully. He stepped forward and delivered the speech he had memorized. "On behalf of Earth, I thank you for your hospitality. It is my hope that through learning and respect, we may build a lasting friendship." His voice echoed awkwardly in the vast hall. He could hear his own accent clearly, every word sounding clumsy compared to the soft rhythm of the Varellan language. When he finished, polite applause followed, but Daniel noticed Alira still watching him. Her head tilted slightly. There was something in her gaze that made him uneasy. As the reception continued, Daniel tried to mingle. The other Varellans spoke to him in slow, careful English, but their polite smiles did little to hide their skepticism. Some asked simple questions about Earth's food and cities. Others made vague remarks about how unrefined humans seemed compared to their people. Daniel found himself drifting toward a quiet corner, away from the crowd. He wondered if he truly belonged here. Earth had sent him because of his experience in cross-cultural work. But how could he hope to understand a species so different from his own? "Are you hiding already?" a voice asked. Daniel turned and saw Princess Alira approaching. Up close, she seemed even taller, her presence almost overwhelming. She carried herself with the effortless confidence of someone who had never been questioned in her life. "I'm just taking in the view," Daniel replied carefully. She smirked. "You humans have strange voices. Everything you say sounds like you are declaring war." Daniel blinked. "I'll take that as a compliment." Alira's smirk widened. I mean that you speak harshly. Varellan words flow like water. Yours sound like stones. Daniel chuckled lightly, though it stung a little. Maybe I'll learn to sound like water one day. She raised an eyebrow. You? Learn our language? Impossible. Humans cannot hear the tones properly. Even if you try, you will always sound wrong. Daniel wanted to argue, but instead, he only smiled. We'll see. Alira gave a soft laugh and walked away, leaving Daniel standing alone again. Her words echoed in his mind long after she left. Impossible. Sound wrong. Daniel clenched his fists quietly at his sides. Maybe she was right. Maybe humans could never truly fit into this world. But something deep inside him refused to accept that. If the Varellans thought humans could never master their ways, then he would prove them wrong. For the rest of the night, Daniel stayed quiet, listening carefully whenever Alira or others spoke in their language. He couldn't understand it, but he began to notice patterns, the way their tones rose and fell, how words seemed to carry emotions beyond meaning. By the time the reception ended, Daniel had made up his mind. He would learn their language, no matter how impossible it seemed, and one day, he would speak it well enough to leave Princess Alira as speechless as she had left him tonight. The palace felt less welcoming the next morning. Daniel walked through the grand corridors, feeling the eyes of Varellans following him. They didn't stare openly, but he could feel it, that quiet judgment, the same as last night at the reception. They spoke softly among themselves, their melodic voices like whispers of a song he couldn't understand. Daniel tried to focus on the purpose of his visit. This was supposed to be about cultural exchange, a chance to build a bridge between humans and Varellans. But how could he build a bridge if they only saw him as a clumsy outsider? As he reached the library hall, his guide for the day was already waiting. Mira, a young Varellan scholar, bowed lightly. Her simple teal robes lacked the shimmer of royalty, but her bright, curious eyes made her stand out. She greeted him in slow English. Daniel, she said carefully, I am to help you study Varellan culture. This is my task from the council. He smiled, relieved to hear a friendly tone. I appreciate that. Where do we begin? She gestured for him to follow. The library was massive, with towering shelves filled with glowing books and floating crystal tablets. Mira explained how each crystal stored generations of knowledge, poetry, history, and philosophy. Daniel tried to listen, but his mind kept returning to Alira's words from the night before. Harsh voice, impossible to learn, always sound wrong. It was more than teasing. She truly believed humans could never speak like Varellans. Can I ask you something? Daniel said as they walked between the shelves. Mira nodded. Do you think a human could learn your language? Speak it the way you do. Mira tilted her head, considering. It is very hard. Our language is not only words, it is sound, feeling, and history. Few outsiders even try. None have mastered it. Her honesty stung, but she wasn't mocking him. Daniel clenched his jaw. Then I'll try. Can you teach me? Mira blinked, surprised. Teach you? That is not part of the program. Then make it part of the program, Daniel said firmly. Please. She studied him for a long moment, then finally nodded. If you truly want this, I will teach, but it will not be easy. You will sound wrong for a long time. I don't care, Daniel said. I'll keep trying until I sound right. Mira gave a small smile. Then we begin. They spent hours at a long table, surrounded by glowing books. Mira started with the basics, simple sounds, tones, and gestures. Daniel quickly learned that Varellan words carried more than one meaning. A single tone could turn a greeting into an insult. A small pause could change a sentence entirely. Your ears are used to flat sounds, Mira explained. You must hear the music in our words. Try again. Daniel repeated a simple greeting, but his tone cracked awkwardly. Mira laughed softly. That sounded like you called me a storm. He groaned. Great. I'm already offending people. Not offending, she said kindly. Just confusing. By the end of the session, his throat ached from trying to match the sounds. Still, Mira seemed impressed by his determination. You work hard, she said. That is rare. As Daniel left the library that evening, exhaustion weighed on him. But his mind buzzed with the challenge. He could almost hear Alira's laughter from last night. Impossible. always sound wrong. Not for long, he thought. The next few days turned into a blur of lessons. Daniel woke early and stayed up late, practicing until his voice grew hoarse. He carried a small device that recorded Mira's examples, repeating them during meals and walks through the palace gardens. It wasn't just words. Mira explained that the language was tied to the Varellan way of seeing the world, harmony, flow, and subtlety. Every phrase must fit like water in a stream, she said. You cannot force it. You must let it move through you. Daniel didn't fully understand, but he tried anyway. One evening, as he sat by a fountain, repeating phrases under his breath, a voice interrupted. Still practicing, stone voice, Daniel looked up. Princess Alira stood before him, her teal robes catching the soft light of the glowing garden. He forced a polite smile. I prefer to call it progress. She raised an eyebrow. You think you can learn our words? You cannot even hear them. Maybe not yet, Daniel replied, but I will. Alira tilted her head, amused by his persistence. Why, to impress me? Daniel smirked slightly. Maybe to prove you're wrong. Alira laughed, a light musical sound that echoed through the garden. You are strange, human. Our language takes years to learn, even for us. You will quit soon. Or maybe I won't, Daniel said. She gave him a long, curious look before walking away without another word. That night, Daniel stayed awake longer than usual, replaying the conversation in his mind. She thought he would quit. She thought he would fail. Good, he thought. Let her think that. He practiced until his voice gave out. By the end of the week, Mira began testing him with short sentences. You are improving, she said one afternoon as they sat in the library. You still sound human, but you begin to sound less wrong. Daniel grinned. That's the best compliment I've gotten here. Mira chuckled softly. Perhaps soon you will say something to the princess in our words, then we will see if she still laughs. Daniel liked that idea. The thought of seeing Alira speechless drove him to work harder. Each failure pushed him forward, each success, no matter how small, gave him hope. And deep down, Daniel knew this wasn't just about Alira anymore. It was about proving that humans could truly stand beside the Varellans as equals, not as guests, but as partners. Daniel woke earlier than usual, before the palace bells rang to signal the new day. He stared at the high ceiling of his guest chamber, feeling both tired and restless. He had been on Varela for nearly 2 weeks, and every day felt like climbing a mountain barefoot. The language lessons were harder than anything he had ever done, and yet he couldn't stop. Every word he learned, every tone he practiced, felt like a small victory. He dressed quickly and headed toward the library. The corridors were quiet at this hour, filled only with the faint hum of glowing wall patterns that brightened slowly. As the palace awakened, he liked these early mornings. They gave him time to think. Mira was already waiting for him at their usual table, sipping from a small cup of glowing blue liquid. She raised an eyebrow when she saw him. You are early, Daniel. Again, he smiled, rubbing the back of his neck. I figured if I keep starting before sunrise, maybe I'll actually sound like a Varellan by the time I leave. She chuckled softly. Perhaps, or perhaps you will only sound like a very tired human. He laughed, but she wasn't wrong. His voice was still rough from hours of practice the night before. Today, Mira had prepared new lessons. She handed him a thin crystal tablet with glowing symbols. These are proverbs, she explained. Our people speak in them often. They carry more than meaning. They carry history. Daniel traced one of the symbols with his finger. So, it's not just about learning words. It's about understanding why they exist. Mira nodded. Exactly. If you only say our words, they are empty. If you feel them, then they are alive. That sentence stayed with him. If you feel them, then they are alive. He repeated the phrase in his head as he studied. Hours passed. Mira read aloud, her words flowing like music. Daniel repeated them, his voice stumbling but improving slowly. She corrected him when he flattened a tone or paused too long. You are still rushing, she said gently. Our words are not to be thrown like stones. They are placed carefully, like steps on a bridge. He exhaled, trying again, slowing his speech. This time, Mira smiled. better. You are listening now, not just speaking. Her praise gave him a small spark of pride. By midday, his head throbbed, but Daniel refused to stop. They practiced until Mira finally closed the tablet. Enough for today, she said. Your mind needs rest. Daniel leaned back with a tired sigh. Rest is overrated. Not when learning, Mira replied. If you break yourself, the words will leave you. She stood, gathering the tablets, but paused. Daniel, why do you work so hard? This is not required of you. Most humans do only what is expected, nothing more. He hesitated before answering. Because I'm tired of being seen as less. Every time I walk into a room, I feel like I don't belong. Like I'm just some loud outsider here to take up space. I want to change that. I want them to see humans differently. Mira studied him for a moment. And the princess, do you also wish to change her mind? Daniel gave a small, wry smile. Especially her. Mira didn't press further, but there was a knowing look in her eyes. That evening, Daniel decided to practice alone in the palace gardens. The sky above Varela shifted to deep violet as the sun set, and glowing plants lit the pathways like lanterns. He sat by the fountain where he had first spoken with Alira and began whispering the proverbs to himself, focusing on tone and flow. Water does not force the stone. It shapes it, he said in halting Varellan. The tree that bends does not break. He repeated each line, slower and more careful than before. He felt the meaning behind the words, trying to match his emotions to the tone. For the first time, it felt less like memorization and more like understanding. You are improving, a voice said suddenly. Daniel nearly jumped. He turned to see Princess Alira standing a few feet away, her expression curious. He scrambled to stand. Your Highness, she waved a hand. Do not stand. I am only walking. She glanced at the tablet on his lap. You practice alone now? Perhaps you are more stubborn than I thought, or more determined, Daniel replied. Alira smirked. Both sound the same to me. She walked closer, her long robes trailing lightly behind her. What did you just say? Something about water and stones. Daniel hesitated, then repeated the proverb in Varellan. Slower this time. His tone wasn't perfect, but it didn't sound completely off. Alira tilted her head. Not terrible. Almost acceptable. Daniel raised an eyebrow. That's the closest thing to a compliment I've heard from you. She smiled faintly. Do not get used to it. They stood in silence for a moment. The only sound the trickling of the fountain. You still sound human, she said finally. But you sound less wrong than before. Daniel chuckled. That's exactly what Mira said. Alira glanced at him. Mira is wise. But tell me, why do you keep trying? It is one thing to study. It is another to live our words. He met her gaze. Because I don't want to just visit your world. I want to understand it, and I want you to understand mine. For a moment, her usual teasing expression faded, replaced by something softer. But she quickly looked away. Ambitious words for a human. Ambition is how we've survived. Daniel said simply. Alira didn't respond. Instead, she turned and began to walk away. Keep practicing, Daniel. Perhaps one day, you will say something worth listening to. Daniel watched her leave, his hands tightening on the tablet. One day, he promised himself, he would. When Mira saw him the next morning, she immediately noticed something different. You sound calmer today, she said as they practiced. As if the words are sitting more comfortably in you. Daniel nodded. I practice with the proverbs. I think I'm starting to feel what they mean. Mira's eyes lit up. Good. Then soon, we can move to poetry. That will test you truly. Poetry. That sounded intimidating. But Daniel didn't back down. He had crossed the first hill. He was ready for the mountain ahead. The palace felt different that morning. Daniel noticed it the moment he stepped out of his chamber. The usual soft hum of music that filled the halls was missing. Guards stood at every corner, their silver armor glinting as their sharp eyes followed everyone who passed. Servants moved quickly, whispering in hushed tones. Something had changed. When Daniel reached the library, Mira was already waiting, but her usual calm expression was gone. She looked tense, her long fingers clutching the edge of a glowing crystal tablet. "What's going on?" Daniel asked. She hesitated. "A misunderstanding. Between your people and ours." His stomach sank. "What kind of misunderstanding?" Mira shook her head. "A trade envoy from Earth delivered a gift to the council, a symbol of friendship. They said, but the gift was poorly chosen. It resembled an object used in our mourning rituals. The council saw it as an insult." Daniel rubbed his forehead. "Great. So now they think we mock them. Some do," Mira said quietly. "There will be a meeting of the Royal Council this evening. They will speak with your ambassador." Daniel sighed. This was exactly the kind of mistake he feared. They had come here to build trust, and instead, Earth had offended the Varellans in the worst way. "What do they expect to happen?" he asked. Mira's eyes shifted toward the window. "That depends on the council. And the princess." "The princess?" Daniel repeated. Mira nodded. "She has influence. If she believes the insult was deliberate, the others will follow her." Daniel felt a pang in his chest. Of course, Alira. He doubted she would defend humans. Not after everything she'd said to him. Still, he wasn't ready to give up. They practiced language as usual, but Daniel couldn't focus. His mind kept wandering to the council meeting. Mira noticed his distraction and finally set down the tablet. "Daniel," she said, "if you want to help, you should prepare to speak." He blinked. "Speak at the council? They won't listen to me. I'm not an ambassador." "You are part of this exchange," Mira reminded him. "You are learning our ways. That makes you different from the others. If you speak their language, even imperfectly, it might show them that humans do not mean disrespect." Daniel stared at her. The thought of standing in front of the Varellan Council, speaking their complex language, terrified him. What if he messed up? What if his words sounded wrong and made things worse? But then he thought of Alira's smirk, her endless teasing about his harsh voice, her claim that he could never sound like them. Maybe this was his chance to prove her wrong, and to help fix the growing rift between their people. "All right," he said finally. "Teach me what I need to say." The hours leading up to the meeting were brutal. Mira drilled him on every tone, every pause, every gesture. They crafted a short but respectful statement, an acknowledgement of the misunderstanding, an apology, and a promise of goodwill. Daniel repeated it again and again until the words felt carved into his throat. "You will not be perfect," Mira warned, "but if you speak from your heart, they will hear it." Daniel nodded, though his hands still trembled. The council chamber was unlike anything Daniel had seen. A massive circular room, its walls etched with glowing symbols that shifted, slowly like living art. At the center sat the royal family on an elevated platform. Round them were dozens of Varellan council members, their faces unreadable. The human delegation stood on the opposite side, including the ambassador, a tall, stern man who looked deeply uncomfortable under the weight of so many alien eyes. When Daniel entered, he felt the silence wash over him. The air was heavy with tension. The king spoke first, his deep voice rolling through the chamber. Daniel couldn't understand the words, but the tone was clear: disappointment, perhaps even anger. Then Princess Alira rose from her seat. Her teal robes shimmered as she stepped forward, her expression sharp and commanding. She spoke at length, her melodic voice filling the room, though Daniel couldn't catch every word. He understood enough. She was questioning Earth's intentions, asking whether the gift had been a hidden insult. Daniel's chest tightened. She was framing this as a test of humanity's sincerity. The ambassador began to respond in English, his voice formal and stiff, but Daniel could already see it in the Varellans' faces. They didn't feel understood. His words fell flat. Before he could stop himself, Daniel stepped forward. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice louder than intended. The ambassador turned in shock. "Daniel, what are you?" But Daniel ignored him. He looked directly at the king and the princess. His heart pounded as every eye in the chamber turned to him. And then, in the best Varellan he could manage, Daniel spoke. He bowed deeply. I am Daniel of Earth. I ask to speak with respect." A ripple of surprise moved through the chamber. He continued, carefully reciting the lines Mira had drilled into him. The gift was meant as a bridge. Not a wound, if it has caused sorrow. We carry that sorrow with you. Humans do not mock the living or the lost. We only seek to learn and to honor your ways. His voice trembled, and he knew his tones weren't perfect, but he kept going. When water meets stone, it does not break it, it learns its shape. So must we. When he finished, the room fell silent. Princess Alira stared at him, her expression unreadable. For the first time since they met, she didn't smirk, she didn't tease. She only watched him, as if seeing him in a new light. The king spoke in a softer tone now, addressing the council. Though Daniel couldn't understand the words, the shift in the room was clear. The tension eased. Murmurs replaced silence. Alira finally spoke again, shorter this time. Then she turned toward Daniel and gave the faintest nod. It wasn't a smile, but it wasn't mockery either. After the meeting, Daniel collapsed onto a bench in the corridor, his whole body trembling. Mira found him minutes later, smiling with rare pride. You did well, she said. Very well. They will not forget this. Daniel let out a long breath. I thought I was going to pass out. But you didn't, Mira said. You spoke, and you were heard. He glanced toward the chamber doors, where Alira had just walked out. For a moment, her gaze met his. She didn't speak, but she gave another small nod before disappearing. Down the hall. It was the first time Daniel felt like she truly saw him. The palace felt lighter the morning after the council meeting. The guards were still at their posts, but the tension in the air had eased. Servants moved more calmly through the corridors, and even the music returned, soft, flowing notes that echoed through the hallways. Daniel could feel the difference. Something had shifted. He had spoken in their language, and they had listened. It wasn't perfect, but it had been enough to calm the anger in the council. When he entered the library, Mira was waiting for him as usual, a faint smile on her face. You are becoming known, she said. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Known? For what? For what you did last night. The council does not forget when someone speaks with humility. And the princess, Mira paused, her smile widening slightly. She spoke well of you. Daniel blinked. She did. Are you sure we're talking about the same Princess Alira? Mira chuckled softly. She is not as unkind as you think. She only tests those she wishes to understand. Daniel thought about that as they sat to study. He had assumed Alira teased him because she disliked him. But maybe Mira was right. Maybe the teasing was her way of seeing what kind of person he really was today. Mira didn't hand him a crystal tablet. Instead, she placed a small, folded piece of fabric on the table. It was a deep teal color, embroidered with silver patterns. This, she explained, is a verse cloth. Each design represents a poem. The one you will study today is from our oldest writers. It is not only words, it is how we see the world. Daniel carefully unfolded it, tracing the silver lines. Poetry, I can barely get through sentences without messing up, and now you want me to sound poetic. Mira gave a knowing look. If you can speak our poetry, you can speak to anyone here, even the princess. Daniel stared at the cloth, feeling the weight of the challenge. All right, let's do it. The poem was short, but impossibly complex. Each word had layers of meaning. A simple phrase about a river also spoke of time, patience, and grief. Mira explained that this was how the Varellans expressed their deepest truths, not directly, but through metaphor. Daniel spent hours practicing the lines. His tongue stumbled over the shifting tones. His throat ached, but he refused to quit. At one point, Mira leaned back and studied him. Why do you push yourself so hard? She asked. Daniel set the cloth down. Because I want to be more than the human they expected. When I first got here, I felt like I was just a guest in a room where I didn't belong. Now, I want to earn my place here. I want to show them that humans can understand them. That I can. Mira nodded slowly. Then, keep going. You are closer than you think. That evening, a messenger arrived at Daniel's quarters. You are requested in the garden. The messenger said, by Princess Alira. Daniel froze. The princess? The messenger only bowed and left. Daniel's heart raced as he made his way through the glowing corridors toward the palace gardens. He found Alira near the fountain where they had spoken before. She stood alone under the soft light of the bioluminescent trees, her teal robes shimmering faintly. "You came," she said as he approached. "You sent for me," Daniel replied. Cautiously, Alira studied him for a long moment. "I heard what you said to the council. You spoke clumsily, but you spoke like someone who tried to understand." Daniel tried to hide his surprise. "That's the nicest thing you've said to me." She gave a faint smile. "Do not get used to it." For a moment, they stood in silence. Then Alira said, "You are learning quickly. Mira teaches you well. But I wonder, can you speak without a teacher?" "Holding your hand?" Daniel frowned. "What do you mean?" Alira's smile turned playful. "A test. If you can speak to me in my language without Mira correcting you, then perhaps I will believe humans can truly learn." Daniel's stomach twisted. He wasn't ready for this, not in front of her. But he remembered the verse cloth. He remembered Mira's words, "If you can speak our poetry, you can speak to anyone here, even the princess." Daniel straightened his back. "Then test me." Alira tilted her head. "Say something true, not copied, not rehearsed. Speak to me as if you were one of us." Daniel took a deep breath. He thought of the poem. He thought of the river, patient, unyielding, shaping the stone with time. He let the words come. "Not perfect, but honest." In Varellan, he said, "I came here as a stone in the river, heavy, still. But now I feel the water shaping me. I am not only human, I am learning to be more." The words felt clumsy on his tongue, but they carried the meaning he wanted. Alira's eyes widened slightly. She didn't laugh. She didn't tease. For the first time since he had met her, she was silent. Daniel shifted nervously. "Did I say it wrong?" She shook her head slowly. "No, you said it well, very well." Her voice was softer than he had ever heard it. She stepped closer, her gaze fixed on him. "No human has spoken like that to me. Not in my language, not with meaning." Daniel's heart pounded, but he held her gaze. "Then maybe humans aren't as impossible as you thought." For a moment, Alira didn't respond. Then, with a faint smile, she said, "Perhaps not." It wasn't teasing. It wasn't mockery. It was something else, something that made Daniel feel like, for the first time, she truly saw him. When he returned to his chamber later that night, Daniel couldn't stop replaying the moment in his head. He had left Princess Alira speechless. And somehow, it felt like more than just a small victory. It felt like the beginning of something new. The days after Daniel's meeting with Alira felt different. The princess, who once only teased him, now treated him with an unexpected curiosity. She still carried her usual confidence, but there was a new tone in her voice when she spoke to him, less mockery, more interest. Daniel noticed it first during a lesson in the gardens. Mira had excused herself for the day, leaving Daniel to study alone. He sat by the fountain, practicing verses from the cloth Mira had given him. His words still stumbled at times, but they were improving, flowing with more rhythm than before. "You sound less like a stone today," Alira's voice interrupted. Daniel turned to see her approaching. "Good evening, princess," he said politely. She waved a hand. "No titles, just speak." "I'm only Alira in this garden." Daniel blinked at her, surprised. "Only Alira? That's new." She sat gracefully on the edge of the fountain, her silver bracelets catching the soft glow of the garden lights. "You think I am always a princess. Even I wish to escape my duties sometimes." Daniel set down his tablet. "You don't seem like someone who wants to escape anything." Alira tilted her head. "And you do not seem like someone who learns a foreign tongue just to pass the time. Appearances are often wrong." For a while, they sat in silence, listening to the sound of water. Daniel finally spoke. "Mira told me that your language is more than words. That it's about feeling. I think I'm starting to understand that." Alira gave him a curious look. "And what do you feel when you speak it?" Daniel thought for a moment. "Small. Like I'm standing in front of something bigger than me. But also connected. Like I'm not just an outsider anymore." Alira studied him closely. "You speak like someone who listens. That is rare, even among my people." Daniel chuckled lightly. "That's the nicest thing you've said to me." So far, Alira smirked. Do not expect me to say it twice. The next day, Daniel was invited to attend another council gathering, not as a speaker, but as an observer. Mira explained that this was a rare honor. They wish to see how you understand our ways, she said. Daniel entered the grand chamber, his nerves returning as he saw the king, queen, and council members seated in their half circle. The room was buzzing with quiet conversation, but when the session began, the air grew heavy with formality. The discussion quickly turned tense. A faction of Varellan nobles was unhappy with Earth's presence. They argued that humans were too different, too clumsy with Varellan customs. Daniel couldn't understand every word, but the tone was unmistakable: doubt, mistrust, and even anger. At one point, one of the nobles gestured toward Daniel. His name was spoken with sharp emphasis. Daniel froze. He didn't know exactly what was said, but it wasn't kind. Princess Alira rose to speak. Her melodic voice carried authority as she addressed the noble. Daniel couldn't catch every word, but he recognized her tone: firm, defensive. Mira leaned toward him and whispered, "She speaks for you. She says you are not like the others, that you tried to understand." Daniel felt his chest tighten. Alira, the same princess who once mocked him, was defending him in front of her people. The argument continued, but Alira's words held weight. The room slowly quieted, the angry voices softening. For the rest of the meeting, Daniel stayed silent, but inside, he couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. Alira hadn't needed to stand up for him, yet she had later that evening. Daniel found Alira in the palace gardens again. She stood beneath one of the glowing trees, her gaze fixed on the sky. "You defended me," he said as he approached. She didn't turn to look at him. "You spoke in our tongue before the council. You showed humility. I will not let others dismiss that." Daniel stepped closer. "Thank you." Alira finally looked at him. "Do not thank me. I did not do it for you alone. I did it because if we cannot learn from each other, then this exchange means nothing." Daniel nodded slowly. "Still, it means something to me." For a moment, they just stood there, the silence between them no longer awkward. "You surprised me, Daniel," Alira said at last. "When you first arrived, I thought you were like the others, loud, quick to speak, slow to listen. But you are different. You make me wonder if perhaps our people can truly share more than words." Daniel smiled faintly. "That's all I've wanted since I got here." Alira tilted her head slightly, studying him. "You sound honest when you say that. Perhaps that is why your words no longer sound like stones." Daniel laughed softly. "You're starting to sound like Mira. Perhaps." "Mira is wiser than I thought," Alira replied with a small smile. The following days brought new challenges. Daniel's lessons grew more intense as Mira introduced him to longer verses and complex idioms. But now, he didn't feel the same weight of isolation he once did. He was no longer just an outsider studying from the edge of a culture he didn't understand. He was part of it. And much of that was because of Alira. She still teased him occasionally, but it felt different now, lighter, almost playful. They spoke often in Varellan, their conversation short but meaningful. One evening, as they walked through the garden, Alira asked him, "Why do humans cling so much to their words?" "You speak quickly, as if afraid of silence," Daniel thought. For a moment, maybe because silence feels empty to us, words fill that space. But for you, maybe silence isn't empty. Maybe it's part of the conversation. Alira gave him an approving look. "You begin to understand." They stopped near the fountain where they first met. Alira glanced at him, her expression thoughtful. "You came here as a guest," she said quietly. "But you may leave as something else, a bridge." Daniel didn't fully understand what she meant, but the words stayed with him long after she left. For the first time since arriving on Varela, Daniel didn't just feel like a visitor. He felt like he belonged. The palace buzzed with energy. Daniel could feel it the moment he stepped into the great hall. Servants rushed with careful steps, carrying glowing banners and placing them along the walls. Guards stood taller, their armor polished to a bright shine. Even the music that usually drifted through the corridors felt different, more urgent, more alive. Mira met him near the entrance, her expression serious. Today is important, she said. The council has gathered not only to speak of trade, but to decide how much trust they will give your people. It is a day of judgment. Daniel nodded slowly, trying to keep his breathing steady. And I'm supposed to be there. You are more than a guest now, Mira replied. You are a voice. They will expect you to speak. Daniel's throat tightened. He had known this moment would come, but knowing it didn't make it easier. Do you think I'm ready? He asked. Mira placed a hand on his shoulder. You are not perfect, but you are ready. The Grand Council chamber was even more magnificent than before. The glowing walls were brighter, casting soft reflections across the marble floor. The king and queen sat in their elevated thrones, their calm faces betraying little emotion. The nobles filled their seats in a wide circle, their robes shimmering like liquid silver and gold. And then there was Alira. She stood beside the king, dressed in deep teal, her hair braided with threads of silver. When her gaze found Daniel, it lingered for just a moment, a brief look that gave him courage. The session began. The king spoke in the flowing cadence of the Varellan tongue, his voice deep and commanding. Others followed, their tones shifting, between sharp debate and measured calm. Daniel couldn't catch every word, but he understood enough. Some still mistrusted Earth. They worried humans were too brash, too quick to act without understanding. Daniel knew they were right, at least partly, but that was why he was here. The ambassador from Earth spoke next, giving a polished speech about cooperation and friendship. It was well worded, but Daniel could feel the distance in it. It lacked the warmth the Varellans valued. It sounded like a negotiation, not a connection. The king turned his gaze toward Daniel. A murmur spread through the room. Mira whispered beside him, They are calling on you. Daniel's pulse quickened. He stood slowly, feeling dozens of eyes on him. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about showing that humans could truly listen, truly learn. He walked to the center of the chamber, bowing deeply in the Varellan way. Then he spoke. First, in halting English, I came here as an observer. But you have made me a student, and now, I hope, you will let me speak as a friend. Then, switching to Varellan, his voice careful but steady, I once came to you as a stone in the river, unmoving, heavy, unsure. But your words have been water, shaping me. You taught me that to speak your language is not only to use your words, but to carry your meaning, to share your silence, to feel as you feel. And I have learned. A soft murmur moved through the chamber. He continued, his confidence growing. I do not stand here as one who understands everything. I stand here as one who wants to understand. Humans are imperfect, but we can listen. We can change, and we can walk beside you, not behind you. He paused, letting the words settle. Then, with a slight bow of his head, he finished, I ask not for forgiveness, nor for favor. I ask for a bridge between us, so that your people and mine may walk toward a future together. When Daniel stepped back, the silence was heavy. The council members exchanged glances, some skeptical, others thoughtful. Then Alira stood. Her voice, clear and melodic, filled the chamber. When this human first came to us, I did not believe he could learn our ways. I believed he would leave as he arrived, loud, clumsy, and unchanged. Daniel felt heat creep up his neck, but Alira's gaze softened. I was wrong, she said. He has learned not only our words, but their heart. He has spoken to us not as a guest, but as one who belongs. If one human can do this, perhaps more can follow. She turned to her father, then to the entire council. If we are to build a bridge, let it begin here. With him, for a moment, no one spoke. Then the king rose, his imposing figure casting a long shadow across the floor. The princess speaks wisely, he said in Varellan, his voice like a slow drumbeat. This exchange was a test, and this human has passed. He looked directly at Daniel. You are no longer only a guest of Varela. You are a bridge between our worlds. The room erupted into soft, approving murmurs. Some nobles still looked cautious, but others nodded with quiet respect. Daniel felt a wave of relief and something deeper, pride. When the session ended, Daniel found himself back in the garden, needing the quiet to calm his racing thoughts. He heard footsteps behind him. "You were brave," Alira said, approaching. Daniel turned, smiling faintly. "I was terrified." Alira's lips curved into the smallest smile. "Good. Fear keeps us honest. And yet you spoke well. You left even me without words." Daniel chuckled. "That's a first." She tilted her head, studying him. "Do you know what my father meant when he called you a bridge?" Daniel shrugged. "I think so. He wants me to help connect our people." "Not only that," Alira said softly, "you are proof that we can meet in the middle, that neither of us must stand alone." Daniel let her words sink in. "Then I'll do it, whatever it takes." For a long moment, they stood in silence, the sound of the fountain filling the space between them. Finally, Alira said, "When you first spoke my language, I teased you. I thought you would quit, but you did not, and now I am glad." Daniel smiled. "Me too." She glanced at him once more before turning to leave. "Do not lose what you have learned here." Daniel, not the words, not the meaning. As she walked away, Daniel looked up at the violet sky. He didn't feel like the same man who had arrived on Varela weeks ago. He felt like someone new, someone who belonged to two worlds, and for the first time, he believed that maybe, just maybe, those worlds could truly walk together.